Okay, so we've got some pretty interesting stuff to dig into today.
Yeah.
You guys have sent in some really great material all about building healthier routines and how those can really support our mental well-being.
hmm
So we're going to take a deep dive into all of that information.
Yeah.
We want to kind of cut through all the noise and figure out what are those important strategies and tools we can use to build routines
Right.
that actually make a difference in how we feel.
I think one of the things that really jumps out from all this material
Yeah.
is this idea that consistency is so crucial.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like a nice to have, it's really fundamental.
Yeah.
You can almost think about mental well-being like tending a garden.
Okay.
One big burst of effort isn't really going to yield those long-term results.
Right.
It's that consistent watering, it's that consistent weeding.
Mm.
It's those small repeated actions that we weave into our day
Right.
that really allow our mental well-being to flourish.
I really like that analogy.
Yeah.
Because it makes it feel less like a chore
Right.
and more like we're nurturing something.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
an ongoing process.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is so great about the sources you shared is that they really emphasize making this feel doable.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not about suddenly, waking up at 5 a.m. every morning and, becoming a completely different person.
Right.
It's about how do we layer in these small, sustainable practices.
Mhm.
And it's those practices that ultimately leave us feeling more centered,
Yeah.
more balanced,
More grounded.
and hopefully with a greater sense of hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about that. Why is having a routine such a cornerstone when we're talking about really looking after our mental health?
So what's really interesting is how a well-structured routine really addresses some of those core vulnerabilities.
Okay.
We all experience when our mental well-being is challenged, right? Those feelings of overwhelm,
Mm.
the anxiety that can often thrive in those moments of unpredictability.
Right. So when things feel out of control,
Exactly.
that's when we tend to feel more anxious.
Yeah. And a solid routine provides a framework. It's almost like building scaffolding around your day.
Okay.
So when those winds of stress and anxiety are blowing,
Mm-hmm.
that structure provides a sense of safety, not just because you know what's coming next,
Right.
but because you're creating that predictable internal environment
Yeah.
that can help us kind of buffer against that external chaos.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like having an anchor in the storm,
Exactly.
something you can rely on when things feel a bit wobbly.
Absolutely. And if we connect that to another key aspect,
Okay.
think about decision fatigue.
Oh, yeah.
When you're feeling low or you're feeling stressed,
Mhm.
even seemingly small choices
Yeah.
can feel incredibly draining.
Right.
And a routine actually automates some of those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So when you wake up, what are the first few things you do?
Yeah.
You free up that valuable mental energy for other things that might require more focus or concentration.
Oh, totally. Think
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
if you're feeling super overwhelmed in the morning
Yes.
and that you have to choose what to wear,
Oh, yeah.
that can feel like a monumental task.
Absolutely.
But if you have a routine in place,
Mm-hmm.
it just takes that off your plate.
You've eliminated that decision.
Yeah. And your brain can just kind of move on to other things.
Exactly.
So that's a really nice way to look at it. It's like you're giving your brain a little bit of a break
Yeah.
in certain areas so it can really focus in other areas.
Absolutely. And the source material also touches on this idea of the positive ripple effect
Okay.
of those small daily achievements.
Mhm.
Even completing a simple part of your routine, like making your bed or having a proper breakfast,
Right.
can actually provide this little boost of accomplishment. It's
Yeah.
that sense of like, okay, I did that.
I did that. I accomplished that.
Exactly. And that can actually influence your overall mood and motivation for the rest of the day.
I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
Like there's a real sense of satisfaction
Yeah.
in just, ticking even those small things off a list.
Mm-hmm.
So now one thing that really stood out to me in the sources that you sent
Okay.
was this idea of flexibility within a routine.
Yeah.
It's not about, becoming a robot
Right.
who's chained to a timetable.
Absolutely not.
So can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the goal is not to create this rigid, unyielding structure that feels restrictive or becomes another source of stress.
Right.
A healthy routine is a supportive one.
Okay.
It's adaptable to your own individual needs
Hmm.
and the realities of life.
Yeah.
There will inevitably be days where you need to deviate from that routine,
Of course.
and that's perfectly okay.
Mm-hmm.
The core is that underlying intention
Yeah.
and that overall pattern of consistency.
So it's like having a foundation.
Yeah,
But, you can move around on that foundation a little bit.
Exactly.
You don't have to stay fixed in one spot.
Yeah, and the sources actually highlight some really specific benefits
Okay.
that tend to emerge when we start to establish these healthy routines.
I'd love to hear about those.
Yeah, so one of the primary ones is stability.
Okay.
You know, a consistent routine really cultivates that sense of safety and control in your daily life.
Right.
So when those external circumstances feel chaotic or unpredictable,
Mm-hmm.
you have those reliable anchors in your day
Yeah.
that can be really reassuring and grounding.
Yeah, that makes me think about, when everything around you feels like it's spinning out of control.
Yeah.
It's really helpful to have those little constants that you can cling to.
Exactly. And the second benefit they point to is this idea of increased energy and motivation.
Okay, that's interesting.
It might seem counterintuitive,
Yeah.
adding more
I
structure.
would think you'd feel more drained.
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But in the long run, consistent routines actually boost your energy levels, and they kind of provide the momentum to engage in those more positive activities.
Oh, I see.
It's about building that initial inertia
Mhm.
to get things going.
So it's like a snowball effect.
Yeah, exactly.
Once you start rolling, it kind of picks up its own momentum.
Exactly. And then the third benefit is improved sleep.
Oh, yeah, sleep is so important.
It's crucial.
That's everything.
Absolutely. And establishing those healthy habits, particularly in your evening routine,
Mm-hmm.
has a direct and positive impact on the quality of your sleep cycle.
Right.
And as we all know, getting sufficient restful sleep is absolutely fundamental for good mental well-being.
You can literally feel the difference in your mood and your clarity after a good night's sleep.
It's like hitting the reset button
It really is.
for your brain and your body.
Okay, so what about that last benefit?
The fourth one they highlight is a greater sense of accomplishment.
Okay.
So, by regularly engaging in these small positive actions
Mm-hmm.
throughout your day, it actually enhances your feelings of self-worth and competence. It's about recognizing that you're taking care of yourself,
Right.
which in itself is a really significant achievement.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the why, why routine is important. Now let's get down to the how.
Okay,
How do we actually build these routines?
let's do it.
And the sources start with what is arguably, the most crucial part of the day,
Yeah,
the morning.
I think so.
What are some key elements for establishing a good morning routine?
What's so insightful here is how the morning routine really sets the tone for the entire day.
Oh, totally.
The goal is to start intentionally with practices that really nourish both your mind and your body
Right.
before you kind of get swept away by
Yes.
the demands and the stresses of the day.
Exactly.
And the sources provide some really excellent actionable ideas.
Okay, like what?
Okay, so the first one, and this is kind of a foundational one,
Mm.
is waking up at a set time.
Okay.
Now, consistency here is really key.
Right.
For regulating your body's natural sleep-wake cycle,
Mhm.
your circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
So think of it like setting your internal clock.
I try to do that even on the weekends.
Yeah.
Even if I sleep in a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
I still try to wake up, within a similar window.
Absolutely.
And I just find that helps me feel more regulated.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it really does.
And the next tip is super simple, but so effective.
Okay.
Hydrate.
Oh, yeah.
Drinking a glass of water first thing in the morning
Mm-hmm.
rehydrates your body after sleep. It
Yeah.
can really give you that feeling of refreshment.
I feel like it kind of wakes up my system.
It does. It's like an internal cleanse.
Yeah. Okay, so what comes next?
Then we move into mindfulness or meditation.
Okay.
Now, this doesn't have to be anything lengthy or intimidating.
Right.
Even just a few minutes of focused, deep breathing,
Mm-hmm.
taking a moment for gratitude, or listening to a short guided meditation
Yeah.
can really help center your mind. Right.
And cultivate that sense of calm
Yeah.
before the day's demands start to escalate.
I know a lot of people, meditation can feel intimidating,
Yeah.
but it really can just be as simple as,
It can be.
taking a few conscious breaths.
Absolutely. It's about finding what works for you
Right.
and starting small.
Okay. So after mindfulness or meditation, what's next?
Then the source suggests incorporating some form of movement.
Okay.
Again, this doesn't need to be a strenuous workout.
Mm-hmm.
It could be light stretching,
Okay.
a few yoga poses,
Yeah.
or even a short walk around the block,
Right.
just to kind of release any physical tension that might have built up overnight.
Right. Get the blood flowing.
Yeah.
And then finally, for the morning, we have breakfast.
Yes.
The importance of a nourishing
It's
breakfast.
so
And
important.
can you talk a little bit about that?
So opting for a balanced meal that includes protein,
Hmm.
healthy fats,
Yeah.
and complex carbohydrates, that provides that sustained energy throughout the morning.
Which sets you up for better focus,
Mhm.
concentration,
Yeah.
and a more stable mood.
Okay, so we've got this amazing blueprint for starting the day.
Yeah.
But, as the sources point out,
Hmm.
self-care and these supportive practices shouldn't be confined to just the morning hours.
Right.
So how can we kind of weave them into the rest of our day?
This is where the definition of self-care really broadens
Right.
beyond just, those indulgent activities.
Right.
It's about proactively and consistently meeting those needs of your mind and body for ongoing replenishment throughout the day.
Yeah.
And the key is to identify and intentionally create those small pockets of time, even in the midst of a busy schedule.
I like that.
Yeah.
So what kinds of specific practices are we talking about incorporating throughout the day?
So the sources mention the value of mindful breaks.
Yeah.
So these are those short, intentional pauses you take to step away from whatever you're doing, whether
Yeah.
it's work or, household responsibilities.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as taking a minute for a few deep breaths,
Okay.
doing a quick stretch at your desk, or stepping outside for a short walk to just reconnect with your surroundings.
Right, so it's like a little reset button for
Exactly.
both your mind and body.
Exactly. And another important aspect they highlight is engaging in creative outlets.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this could be anything that allows you to express yourself and tap into a different part of your brain.
Yeah.
So it could be writing, drawing, playing a musical instrument, cooking, gardening,
I love that.
even just doodling during a meeting.
I do that all the time.
It's about finding those activities that bring you joy
Mm-hmm.
and allow for that self-expression.
I find even when I carve out just like a tiny bit of time for something creative,
Yeah,
it really shifts my perspective
it does.
and boosts my mood.
Yeah, absolutely. And the sources also emphasize the importance of social connection.
Oh, that's so crucial.
Reaching out to friends or family, even for a quick text exchange,
Yeah.
a brief phone call, or just a shared coffee break can significantly boost your mood through that positive interaction and that feeling of being connected to others.
Yeah, that sense of belonging and connection is so important,
Absolutely.
especially when you're feeling, stressed or isolated.
Yeah. And then finally, we shouldn't underestimate the restorative power of rest and relaxation
Oh, yeah.
throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
This could be a short power nap,
Okay.
or even just setting aside a few minutes to consciously relax without any distractions.
Right.
No phones, no multitasking,
Yeah, just being present.
just allowing yourself to be still.
That feels so luxurious.
It can be.
Just to give yourself permission to pause.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're moving into the evening.
Okay.
The day is winding down,
Yes.
and the sources place a lot of emphasis on the evening routine and how that can promote better sleep.
Yeah.
So can we talk about why the evening routine is so critical?
Absolutely. So, the quality of our sleep is so deeply intertwined with our mental well-being.
Right, it affects everything.
It really does. Insufficient sleep or poor quality sleep can negatively impact our mood.
Yeah.
It can impact our cognitive functions, things like focus and memory.
Mm-hmm.
And it can also affect our ability to manage stress effectively.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
It really is.
And a relaxing and consistent evening routine acts as this signal to your body that it's time to slow down,
Yeah.
to prepare for rest,
Mm-hmm.
and to transition into that sleep mode.
So it's like setting the stage.
Exactly. And the source provides some great tips for this.
Okay, I'd love to hear them.
The first, echoing our earlier conversation about mornings, is setting a regular bedtime.
Okay.
So going to bed around the same time each night,
Even on the weekend.
even on the weekends when possible,
Yeah.
helps to regulate your body's natural sleep-wake cycle
Mhm.
and optimize that sleep quality.
So consistency is really a theme
Yeah,
throughout the whole day.
it's so important. And the next crucial tip is limiting exposure to screens,
Oh.
ideally for at least an hour before you plan to go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
That blue light that's emitted from phones and tablets
Yeah.
can actually interfere with the production of melatonin,
Right.
which is that hormone that naturally helps you feel tired and fall asleep.
It's so hard to put the phone away, though.
It's so hard.
But I definitely notice the difference in my sleep
Yeah,
when I do.
it's worth it.
It really is.
And then following that, creating a relaxing wind-down routine is key.
Okay.
So this involves intentionally creating that calm and soothing atmosphere
Mm-hmm.
in the hour or so before bed.
Right.
So dimming the lights in your home,
Yeah.
maybe putting on some quiet music,
Mm.
or engaging in a relaxing activity like reading,
Yeah.
just signaling to your body that it's time to relax.
And then the final tip for the evening routine.
Yes, the sources suggest incorporating a gratitude practice.
Oh, I love that.
So taking a few moments before bed to write down 3 things you're grateful for from the day can really help shift your mindset toward positivity
Right.
and cultivate that sense of peace before you drift off to sleep.
It's such a nice way to end the day
Yeah,
on a positive note.
absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about building these routines
Yeah.
throughout the entire day,
Mm-hmm.
but how do we stick with them?
Right.
When life throws its inevitable curveballs,
Yeah.
how do we build that resilience?
So this is where that principle of consistency really demonstrates its power.
Okay.
Maintaining progress, even in small steps, gradually builds resilience and provides a sense of inner stability that you can draw upon
Yeah.
when those challenges or setbacks inevitably arise.
So you're building up our reserves.
Exactly. And the source offers some great advice on how to stay on track.
I'd love to hear it.
So the first is setting realistic expectations.
Okay.
Don't try to overhaul your whole life overnight
Right.
and implement a million new habits at once.
Yeah.
Start with small, manageable changes
Mm-hmm.
that you can realistically maintain.
Right, that's so important.
Because trying to do too much too soon
Yeah.
can lead to feeling overwhelmed and giving up altogether.
Yeah, exactly. And then what's the next tip?
The next tip is tracking your progress.
Okay.
Keep a simple journal
Mm-hmm.
or use a habit tracking app
Right.
to monitor things like your mood,
Yeah.
your energy levels,
Mhm.
and how consistently you're engaging in those routine practices
Right.
over time.
Okay.
That can provide you with valuable insights
Yeah.
into what's working for you.
Right.
And it can also keep you motivated
Yeah.
because you can see how far you've come.
You have that evidence.
Exactly. It's tangible.
Okay, so what about the third tip?
The third tip is acknowledging and celebrating those small wins
Oh.
along the way.
Hmm.
Recognize and appreciate every step forward you take, no matter how small.
Yeah.
This reinforces that positive behavior
Right.
and keeps you feeling encouraged.
I think those little celebrations along the way can make a really big difference.
They really can. And finally, remember to be flexible and to be kind to yourself.
Self-compassion.
Yes, life happens.
Yeah.
And there will be times when your routine gets disrupted due to unforeseen circumstances.
Of course.
And that's okay.
Right.
Be gentle with yourself, acknowledge that it's okay,
Yeah.
and adjust as needed.
Right.
The goal is not perfection
Right.
or rigid adherence.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. It's about that overall intention
Yeah.
and consistently returning to those supportive practices when you can.
And I think that self-compassion piece
Mm-hmm.
is so important because it's really easy to, get discouraged.
It is.
And just give up entirely
Yeah.
when things don't go exactly according to plan.
Yeah, we're human.
We are human.
And the sources also touch on this idea of maintaining that progress over time
Okay.
and really integrating these routines into your life for the long term.
Right.
Healing and growth aren't linear.
They're not.
So how do we ensure that these practices remain supportive
Yeah.
through those ups and downs?
How do we make those changes stick?
So what's really insightful here is that emphasis on regularly connecting with your why.
Okay.
Take the time to periodically remind yourself of those core reasons.
Yeah.
Why you initiated these routines in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's to improve your mental health, to strengthen your relationships,
Yeah.
to increase your happiness, or to achieve specific goals.
Right.
That connection to your deeper purpose can be so motivating,
Mm.
especially when you're going through a challenging time.
So it's like your North Star.
Exactly.
Even when you get off track, you
Yeah.
can look up and see, okay, that's where I'm headed.
That's my guiding light. And the source also suggests revisiting your routine on a regular basis.
Okay.
As your needs, your circumstances, your personal growth all evolve over time.
Right.
Your routine should adapt as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know what felt supportive 6 months ago?
Yeah. Might not be the best fit now.
It's a living thing.
It is.
It's constantly evolving.
Absolutely. And finally, going back to that self-compassion piece,
Yeah.
and understand that setbacks and deviations are totally normal. They don't erase the progress you've already made.
Mm-hmm.
Be kind to yourself. practice that self-understanding.
Yeah.
That's essential for long-term sustainability.
Okay, so I think the core message that I'm taking away from all of this
Yeah.
is that building a daily routine
Mm-hmm.
that pri prioritizes and supports our mental health
Yeah.
is an incredibly powerful tool.
It's so powerful.
It's not about these grand gestures or these radical transformations. It's
No.
about those consistent, small, intentional steps
Mm.
that really build up our resilience and
Yeah.
help us to feel better
And maintain that momentum over time.
and help us to kind of stay the course even when things get tough.
Absolutely. It's about consciously and consistently weaving those nourishing practices
Yeah,
into the fabric of your day
I love that.
to really nurture your body and your spirit
Yeah.
in a holistic and sustainable way.
So, after this deep dive into all this great material that you sent,
Mm-hmm.
here's a thought that's really sticking with me.
Okay.
Maybe the most profound and long-lasting impact of establishing a consistent routine for mental well-being
Yeah.
isn't just the structure and the predictability.
Right.
It's that deeper sense of intentionality
Yeah.
that it brings to the act of caring for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's about making that conscious choice
Right.
day after day
Yeah.
to actually prioritize our own mental health.
It's a commitment
It
to
is. Yeah,
ourselves.
and it's through these small, consistent actions
Mm-hmm.
that we really start to shift our relationship with our own mental health
Yeah.
and build up that inner strength and resilience.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a really powerful thought.
Yeah, it is.
And I think it's a great place to leave it for today.
I agree.
So thank you so much for sending in all of this great material. And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.